Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to ADI's webinar talking about supporting students sense making through phenomenon-based investigations. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Brianna Ivy. I'm a professional learning specialist here at Argument Driven Inquiry. Our moderator is going to be Monica Wascom. She's a professional learning specialist here with me as well. She will be monitoring our chat. So using Zoom, here are some tools that you may see on your Zoom. You have the chat button where you can chat with others in the webinar. Also, you have your raised hand button, and then you have your question and answer button on your screen. As you think of questions, we really recommend that you drop those questions in those question and answer section on Zoom. So our goals for this webinar are going to be, what is a phenomenon-based instruction? What is sense-making in science? How does ADI support student sense-making through phenomenon-based investigations? And then a live question and answer session at the end. So, what is a phenomenon in science and engineering? A phenomenon is an observable, real-world event or experience that engages students to ask questions and seek understanding while using their science knowledge to explain or predict. Here, we have a picture of a hailstorm that has taken place in Texas. This is a real-world event that students can observe, and it engages them to start asking questions, such as, what is a hailstorm? How are hailstorms created? How big are those hailstorms? Because they're making a pretty big splash. How do we use phenomenon to drive teaching and learning? We want students to shift from learning about a topic to figuring out why or how something happens. We want students to be engaged in building evidence-based explanation that help them figure things out. We want them to anchor learning in explaining phenomenon, supporting students' ownership for wanting to build science and engineering knowledge. What this is saying is that we want phenomenons to drive students to ask questions, to get them engaged in that phenomenon, get their minds wondering about things. We want them to understand and want to improve the world around them. We want them to share their ideas. We want to anchor their learning in explaining the phenomenon. What does phenomenon-based instruction look like? So here, take a minute and read over this chart. It says instead of using phenomenons to, such as making science cool or flashy, we can use phenomenons to create a need to learn by introducing something puzzling to figure out. So what does this look like? Well, we want students to focus on that phenomenon plus questions that guide their learning. We want all students to support their learning. We want students to be engaged in the materials. We want students to take that phenomenon and wonder about, how does this happen? How does this apply to the world around me? We all want students to be supported in their learning. And through that good asking a question, it will help support them. What is sense making in science? Science is how we try to make sense of the world around us by giving meaning to a collection of ideas and actively trying to figure out the way the world works. So why does all of that matter? Why does sense making in science matter? Well, we want to prepare students to be consumers of scientific information outside of K-12 education. So if we think about it, we want students to be able to graduate and become citizens that can make decisions concerning different science concepts. If you think about the world we're in now, we're in a pandemic. We're making decisions now about our health and things around us using that science knowledge that we do have. Right here, we have the science and engineering practice that was put out by the K-12 Science Education. These practices, as we look at them, these are the things we want our students to be doing in our science classrooms or in science altogether. But if we kind of look at this, these look like some of the skills that we use on an everyday basis. We ask questions as we maneuver through our lives to figure out things. We develop and use models. We create budgets, like creating a budget helps us to plan and carry out things. We analyze and interpret all the data around us. Even today in our webinar, we are analyzing and interpreting. You guys are analyzing and interpreting the data and the information that I'm giving you right now. So these are practices that we want in the science classroom, but these are skills that students can use outside of that classroom. How does ADI support student sense making? This summer at GSTA, a man named Jeremy Peacock presented this idea about sense making. He generated this checklist or criteria that we're going to be referencing as we talk about sense making through phenomenon-based instruction. ADI has a total of 7 stages for our science and math investigations. Today, we're gonna look at task 1, which is our first stage, and phenomenon, and having students figure out something. And how does that help them and support them in sense making in science? Well, one of the ways we do that, we actually give them an anchored phenomenon. So in ADI, we give them a phenomenon that is real, that comes from the real world, such as this one that we see on our screen. This is a real news article. It helps anchor their experience, so all students have somewhere where they can talk about. It gives them a common experience to draw from. It creates a shared understanding or a shared basis that students can learn from. Students are encouraged to share their wonders. So within our first stage, after students watch a video or watch or look at a phenomenon, they're asked to write down some things that they wonder. What are some questions that they have as they watch that particular phenomenon? Students are encouraged to use their own personal experience and background knowledge. The phenomenon discussion provides teachers also with an opportunity to hear individual students and listen to their prior knowledge and what they have observed. To help make their learning equitable, all students can participate because students do come into our classrooms with information. Students are prompted to figure something out. Within our first stage, students are given a task. So that task tells them a little bit more about the investigation, and then it gives them a guiding question. That guiding question is what students will be figuring out. And that guiding question leads to even more questioning. And it kind of guides students. So as they go through the investigation and learning about a different science topic, students are able to make sense of that topic and be able to answer those really important questions. Classes build a shared knowledge. So by watching that phenomenon and talking about it and generating great questions, students are bound in a shared knowledge. They all have something that they can pull from because they are anchored within that one phenomenon. Students utilize SCPs and CCSs. So those are science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts. As they work through that phenomenon, as they tried to answer all of those questions that they started to think about as they were watching that phenomenon, and as they try to make sense of a topic. So looking back at that sense making and science checklist, ADI provides students with a section where they can wonder about a phenomenon. They can ask questions. They can ask each other questions. They can even think about questions that will get them to a bigger answer. They're tasked to figure something out. We give them a guiding question that they have to figure out. The class builds shared knowledge as they talk and as they discuss. Students generate their own ideas. They share those ideas and then they compare ideas and reach a consensus of what they see and what they think. Students are using science and engineering practices. They're asking those questions. They're using those cross-cutting concepts. And then the investigation is going to be that criteria for success. So as they ask questions, as they try to figure out a concept or an idea, the investigation gives them that criteria to help them kind of like a roadmap to getting to where we want them to be. I like this quote. This quote talks about a natural phenomenon in engineering challenges in science investigations and engineering design increases their understanding of the world around them. And that's what we want. We want our students to be curious and to ask questions and just to figure out how things work and how things are created in the world that they live in. It encourages students to do science and engineering. It increases their conceptual knowledge. It helps them with problem-solving skills and reasoning as they travel through the K-12 education system. All right. we are at the point where I would love to hear some of your questions. So right now I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to submit any questions that you would like to ask from the information that was delivered. As you guys are typing your questions, I'm going to give you some more information. On our website, we have free downloads where you can download sample investigations, scaffold resources, investigation proposal templates, peer review guides. So this is a great area for you guys to kind of explore. We also have available a library of webinars where you can go and you can watch videos. Though we have videos on different stages, we have videos on just different ideas. So I encourage you to go watch some of those awesome phenomena. We would love it if you guys would follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. We're showing some amazing works. So here is some of our social media handles, and I'll leave that up so that maybe you can jot it down and see what we're doing on social media. All right, we are at the section where I get to answer some of the questions that you have dropped in that question and answer section. Monica, do we have any questions?
We do have a couple of questions. Brianna, question number one is, can I just add a phenomenon to my existing labs?
Yes, you absolutely can add a phenomenon to your existing labs. But we just want you to keep in mind that we want the phenomenon to have students create questions. We don't want the phenomenon to give them all of the answers. We want the phenomenon to create that curiosity within our students. Monica, do we have any more questions?
Yes, ma'am, we have one more. So within our investigations, can we utilize more than one phenomenon?
Yes, you can use more than one phenomenon. We suggest starting with the phenomenon that your investigation is anchored in. So if you have a lab and you're like, this is a really awesome lab, but I want to try introducing a phenomenon to get my students asking questions, to get them engaged, that is awesome. And then you can also include other phenomenons throughout your investigation that will benefit getting students to a point where they're learning about a topic. Thank you, Monica, for letting us know our questions for this session. We are at the end. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Oh, we do. We have one more question. So it says, what is your ideal group number of students for discussing phenomenons? So phenomenon can be answered whole group. So I know when I was a teacher, we would watch a phenomenon and then I would kind of give them a moment to themselves to kind of think and come up with wonders. So questions that they may have about the phenomenon or some things that they noticed. But you can also do it in small group, such as I know when I had English language learners in my classroom, sometimes they needed more of a smaller group to kind of have those discussions and to talk a little bit more and come up with those questions. So phenomenons can be done in whole group or small group. Thank you for that question. That was an awesome question. Well, if we don't have any more questions, oh, we have somebody just raised their hand and it popped that way. So we have, is there a certificate that comes with the webinar today? No.
We can absolutely send you a certificate if you'll just reach out to us at howdy@Argument-Driven Inquiry, and we can get that made for you.
Thank you, Autumn. Well, if you guys don't have any more questions, oh, look like we do have some more questions. Oh, well, if you don't guys have any more questions, this is the end of our webinar. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day.